townsfolk drew in closer as the three missionaries walked toward, I'm probably going to take the word walked out, it's not a strong word, but walked toward the dilapidated, and I misspelled that, the dilapidated church. That'll work. Alright, so instead of walked, let's say maneuvered. Maneuvered. Yeah, and I knew I wasn't going to misspell that correctly on the first try. Alright. A lot of effort into a first sentence, but a first sentence matters, so that may not even be good enough, but we'll get back to it. Alright. The townsfolk drew in closer as the three missionaries maneuvered toward the dilapidated church. Reverend Augustus Crest led the way, as if the folk weren't holding weapons and burning holes into them, into the intruders. Sorry, I'm moving slow today. My brain isn't going as well as I thought it was, but we'll muscle through here. Burning holes into the intruders with their eyes. Pastor Elmer Timms. I'm trying to see how I spelled that on this sheet. I'm not sure. Reverend Pastor Timms. We'll do it like that. Pastor Elmer Timms whispered from Augustus's left. All right. Whispered from Augustus' left. Gus. When nothing else came out of the man's, came, let's say forth, came forth from the man's trembling lips, Augustus said, "Hold strong, brother." Gus had no illusions that Elmer had the sort of iron in his soul, nor spirit in his heart for this sort of real danger in the service of the Lord. No, Elmer, let's call him Pastor Elmer. Pastor Elmer was more of a Sunday and Wednesday preacher in a church with air conditioning, and PowerPoint song lyrics. He didn't like serving in the mission field, and he sure did not like the sort of pressure the apostles felt. He didn't like serving in the mission field, and he sure did not like the sort of pressure the apostles felt in the early days of the church. But I thrive upon it, Gus said, finishing his thought out loud. Sister Dorothy, okay, Dorothy has an extra O in it. Dorothy Hemp whispered, "Amen," from his right. Elmer muttered, "I think we got to survive in order to thrive." Gus rolled his eyes. Not in the mood to be martyred today. Then how about you don't shake and squawk? I know there's a W in squawk. Like a scared chicken waiting to be beheaded and plucked. Let's say act and squawk so much do chickens squawk? AUWK. Dorothy asked. Alright, Gus actually laughed aloud as a fellow with a hand axe brandished it in front of them. He started to raise the dull head of the thing, and showed gaps between discolored teeth. Gus used 2 fingers to push the weapon aside. The fellow looked too shocked at the missionaries' audacity to put up a fight. Gus used his other hand to shuffle the fellow a few steps sideways as the 3 evangelists passed. passed onward. Alright. I need to be clear about what's going on in here before this fellow steps in. So where does that go? Alright, rolled his eyes. Okay. Let's say the good old boy was white and dirty. Everyone in town was. Mountains and forest rolled away in all directions. Animals howled, barked, and chirped at one another through the surrounding wilderness. Alright. Many of the buildings they passed were boarded over. Alright, I didn't spell that right at all. Were boarded over. Many of the buildings they passed were boarded over and looked to be crumbling out from behind that hammered wood. Houses that sat back from the central roadway did not appear to be aligned on any side streets themselves. The scrap wood and scrap metal structures with old plastic for windows look to be built any place folks found a clear spot between trees. Trails of dirt, mud, and gravel weaved in and around all these crumbling places before vanishing over a hill or down into an overgrown gully. Okay. Go back home, Thumper. Someone yelled. Others toned in with growls of agreement. A skinny boy with one eye and a diseased socket that wasn't covered with any patch leaned out and spit at their feet. Elmer shuffled a bit, even though the kid's aim was off. No depth perception, Gus thought. Elmer's cowardly shuffle. Elmer's cowardly shuffle brought laughs and added boldness to the mob that was working itself up into a lather. Get your spine straight, Elmer, or I'll push you into their arms. Gus said low. Okay. Alright, where are we going with this? That'd be a good thing to know, wouldn't it? Dorothy whispered what Gus guessed was a prayer under her breath. He had nothing against praying, of course, but he liked the idea of projecting confidence that God was already with him. We don't need none of your preaching, boy. More roaring agreement. I'll send you to meet Jesus, another guy with a thready high voice, threatened. Laughter, louder and meaner laughter. Gus spoke with a forced calm. Just keep moving. Keep on. One man, stripped to the waist, reached out for Dorothy's behind. Gus pulled her forward and swatted the man's greasy hand away. The man cursed Gus and balled his fists. No way to treat a lady, Gus said. I'll treat you like a lady. Man's eyes were milky white. Gus wondered how much the fellow could really see. Out of the ribs under his... Clever, thanks for being back. Out of the ribs under his right arm, the strange fellow had a third arm. This one was still baby small, boneless, and shriveled. But it was clearly the makings of an extra arm. Alright. But it was clearly the makings of an extra arm. Gus wasn't... Well, let me make that the same paragraph. I know it's learning a little long. That's alright. Gus wasn't... I'm going to cut that paragraph. I know I'm into micromanaging here, but that's alright. Gus wasn't sure that sort of thing could... How have you been lately? Holding on all right? I'm doing okay. I have had a lot of cloudy days. I'm pushing through on some days where I might normally cancel a stream because I was looking back at August and realized how many I'd canceled. So even on days when I may not be as clear, I'm still trying to go ahead and get some writing done and even write some on stream. So usually once I get going, I can get into the flow, and that's kind of where I am right now. But overall, I'm doing well. I appreciate you asking. Gus wasn't sure that sort of thing could be explained by inbreeding alone. Maybe some sort of curse had fallen on the isolated town. All right. No place was better for a curse than this one. Gus thought of a few witty comebacks, but he decided none of them made this situation better. Alright, I think I'm getting ready to write up another horror story myself here soon. That sounds good. Not too sure what angle I'm going to take yet, though. You run... getting ideas for a story is kind of interesting. I mean, they come from everywhere, but then you get to a point where you're starting to look at things and you come up with a story idea and you think, oh, this is creative, and the more you start to develop it, you're like, well, that sounds kind of like this other thing I saw, so if I want to do this, I got to find another angle to it. And then you start running up against all these other things that have happened, and then suddenly you find yourself where you feel like you got no ideas. So it's no small thing to come up with a brand new idea for a story, and then of course no small thing to execute it. But maybe that's part of the magic of writing is working through that stuff. So I don't envy you trying to come up with an idea. I have to do that quite often, and it's often not easy. That's for sure. Even when you're writing a lot of stories. All right, make the situation better. None of them honored God, for sure. I think I like to start with characters, then put them in a horror story as a backdrop. At least that's my process. Characters is, of course, there's all the elements of story need to be there at some point, but I think characterization is the strongest one to build up. So like if you have strong characters in a story, if they're ones that people care about, you can almost write anything. So like a really great literary story, that has no genre elements, no action, no nothing supernatural, all that kind of stuff. People will be interested in those stories, just ordinary life type stories if the characters are good, which is a challenge sometimes. But I think that's the heart of a horror story is you gotta when people are going through bad stuff, you have to care about the people, and that's where a lot of horror stories fall down. I've tried all along to try to create characters that are interesting. I've gotten, especially writing live on Twitch, man. It's a lot of times I'm just starting with a title, and then I'll write down some names and stuff, and sometimes I use them and sometimes I don't. But it's hard. You just every once in a while you just got to find your way into a story. Kudos to you. I don't think I have the discipline to devote my attention to writing and streaming at the same time. It gets easier with practice, like everything. It's funny. Armand Rosamilia, my friend and yours, is looking at streaming. So he's getting his overlays ready. He's practicing with the software, and so pretty soon he's going to be doing some practice streams and stuff. I'm looking forward to that. Again, it's scary getting on there that first time, and I've told people it's very alien. So this is completely the opposite of how writing is supposed to work. This solitary act where you get yourself away from everything and then focus in. But it was funny. I was reading an article. Someone had made a mention of seeing me stream, and they said it reminded them of, Harlan Ellison. And I was trying to figure out what they were talking about, and then I remembered that Harlan Ellison back in the 70s would go into bookstores and sit in the bookstore window and just type stories, and people would come and watch him, and they would talk to him, and he'd take story titles from people and then create the story from scratch. And his stated goal was to demystify writing, that it wasn't just some magical thing that nobody could do. He wanted to make it look like it was accessible to everybody, and which a lot of people would agree with, even people that see writing as a big skill that not everybody has. But Ellison went a little further and said that he thought second drafts were overrated. So like he was pushing back against this idea of rewriting. Now I wouldn't go so far as to say that a second draft is a bad idea, because I think no second draft is a terrible idea in my opinion, and that can be as simple as just going through and editing and make sure your commas are in the right place. Of course, he was working on a typewriter, so it was a different animal back then. You really did have to retype when you were making changes and stuff. But I do think he had a point about the idea that unending rewrites don't necessarily improve the story each time. So I do agree with that. But it's kind of interesting that essentially writing in a bookstore and answering people's questions and talking to folks is pretty much what this is. This idea of streaming. So Harlan Ellison was doing it since the 70s. And so it was kind of interesting because as I was doing this, I felt like I had no guidelines to go from. I was kind of trying to figure it out myself, but then looking back, I'm realizing no, there's a bigger tradition to this sort of thing. But it is very much like patting your head and rubbing your stomach. You do got to know when it's finished. Yeah, rewrites are an important part of polishing a piece. Yeah, and especially if you really go for it on a first draft, like if you're not being careful in the sense of like you're trying not to take it too far, trying not to do anything that might throw the story off. A lot of times you miss like the big things that happen in the story. So I always try to go into those first drafts fearless, to just run at them and not be afraid of breaking the story, and that usually gets me my best stuff. But the price of that is that I can't just do one edit, like just a quick read through and I'm done. So I've gone from typically doing one big edit before I turn something in somewhere to doing a couple. Now I don't get into usually doing 3, 4, 5, 6 edits on, especially on a short story. I may look at a novel more times, but trying to be more fearless with the first draft, I think, is required a little more attention to the editing afterwards. That's the price of being fearless in the beginning, but I think it's the right way to do it. And of course, I think it connects to a bunch of other things too, like people who say to write drunk and edit sober. I think that touches on that idea of like just this uninhibited, wild, almost high abandon in creating a story, and then getting serious when it's time to polish and edit and that kind of thing. So all of that kind of connects together. I don't know that it's a good idea to write drunk necessarily. I know authors who do it, but I think there's benefit to being clear-headed on a first draft, even when you're going wild. I'm glad you're here, man. It's good to talk to you. All right, none of them honored God for sure. All right. Let's see. A woman with a receding hairline, large hips, and stringy hair stood in their path and wearing a sack of a dress. What ails you, sister? Gus called out. All right. There was a bit of laughter, but confused whispers and a thick quiet spread through the crowd. It was more of a awkward silence in a conversation than it was anyone actually calming down. Even the balding woman lost some of her confident gravity. Okay, maybe I'll have to take some notes from my new story. Go ahead, man. If you figure out anything here, that's the way to go. All right. Sounds like my family got home. They were at bike practice, so I can hear one of them getting loud out there. Even the balding woman lost some of her confident swagger. Confident gravity, rather. She spoke with wavering tones that reminded Gus a bit of Elmer, who was now visibly shaking next to Gus. I don't speak up, woman, Gus ordered. The crowd backed off a step. Now Elmer could manage to hold his water, they might get out of this alive. Alright. What? Alright, I need to fix this word here because I'm about to use it again. What ails you? I don't even know if that's right, but I'm going to use it again. What ails you? I asked. I got the arthritis, but I'll be doing better than you soon. The crowd grumbled approval. All right. Gus said, "You will if you believe." Now, do you want to be well, lady? Alright, let's say what? Do you want to be healed? You stepped in my path because the Lord willed it. Whether you respect your Creator or not. So now is your choice. If my God can heal you, do you want me to ask him to do so? Make a choice, woman. I'm not here to stand around. I'm on God's business. You probably say about. I'm about God's business. Alright. I'm about God's business. Everyone, hold on, that'd be capitalized. Everyone waited for her to finish. I want to be healed. Gus stepped forward, and the crowd shuffled away, but stayed close enough to watch. A few men jostled others to get to where they could see. Gus's hands started to glow, and a few dirty old boys and gals fell to their knees. Maybe they weren't yet worshiping. Maybe they weren't yet worshiping, but they were fearing a higher power, one way or the other. Don't touch me. Please. The woman said. You already decided, sister. Gus struck her in the forehead. There was a flash of light, and a gasp traveled through the crowd, through the townsfolk. His hands were swallowed in that flash on impact, so no one saw for sure. His hands were swallowed in the flash on impact, so no one saw for sure, but it sounded like he hit that woman with a closed fist. She stumbled backward and bounced her head, bounced the back of her head on the ground when she fell. She was out. You killed her. You're the devil. If you believe in the devil, Gus challenged. It's better to say just said and not get fancy with challenged or other words like that, but I'm going to do it anyway. If you believe in the devil, Gus challenged, then you must believe in God. I ain't never seen God, one man countered. But I believe I've seen the devil today. Gus spread his hands and the crowd recoiled. Gus spread his hands and the crowd recoiled. Either way, you should show holy fear before me. Alright. This is taking a turn I didn't expect, but I really didn't know where the story was going anyway, so let's see what happens. Alright. Pipes, clubs, and blades lifted around them. Elmer, let's put this in a new paragraph. Elmer started, well, no, I'm going to keep it the same paragraph, sorry. Elmer started to outright weep. He wasn't much good under pressure like this, nor really any other time, as far as Gus was concerned. Okay. Pastor Elmer dropped to his knees and held out his palms in a defensive posture. All right. The remaining teeth of the mob showed as they leered at the pastor's terror. Elmer drew in a breath to start begging, but Gus had no intention of letting him finish. Gus seized the coward's chin and the back of his head. He twisted in two different directions, and Elmer finally shut up because he twisted in two different directions, and Elmer finally shut up because his neck snapped like kindling. The dead pastor first went stiff and then slumped boneless to his side. Alright, Elmer drew in breath to start begging. Let's say, "Ye of little faith." Alright. The dead pastor went stiff, boneless to his side. Alright, so let's finish this guy off. The mob pulled up short again. The old lady Gus had put on the ground started to twitch, but she wasn't going to come around fast enough to make his case. Alright, Gus's hands started. Hey, thanks for being here, man. Claw of time. Alright, Gus's hands started to glow once more. He took Elmer by his broken neck with both hands. I'm writing a horror story called Your God Bleeds, and it has a couple missionaries and sort of a isolated, I'm guessing an Appalachian type town. I was kind of making it up as I go, and so I wasn't sure where it's going to go, but apparently this fellow is a dark faith healer of some kind, so we're going to see how he finishes off here. He took Elmer by his broken neck with both hands and hoisted him upward. Alright, let me spell hoisted correctly. Hoisted him upward. Bones ground and scraped against one another. The crowd hissed in revulsion. think that needs to be a U. Let's try it. Nope, still misspelling it. Alright, revolution. No, revulsion. There we go. S-I-O-N. That was my problem. Now only you guys know that I couldn't spell the word revulsion. Alright, the crowd hissed in revulsion. Come forth, Gus whispered. That light over his hands vanished with another flash, and all the bones in, what's this guy's name? Elmer. And Elmer's neck crackled. Alright. Horror is generally my genre. I've sold stories in fantasy. I've sold stories in steampunk. I have a contract for writing a Western right now, so I've ventured out into a number of different genres professionally, but horror tends to be what I come back to. And here on stream, I tend to find myself doing horror a good bit. Sometimes I'll come up with a title and do a different genre on purpose, just to get something different. But left to my own devices, I almost always tend to drift toward horror when I'm writing something. The light over his hands vanished with another flash, and all the bones in Elmer's neck crackled. Gus let go, and Elmer staggered from side to side with his eyes still closed. All right. A few people in the crowd. I keep saying crowd. Let's go back to mob. A few people in the mob dropped their weapons and reached out to catch Elmer if he were to fall. The pastors, let's say the resurrected pastor's eyes fluttered open, and he turned his head from side to side. A few smaller crackles. Okay, I don't know what I was doing there. Try to make smaller past tense for some reason. A few smaller crackles made the townsfolk hiss again. Bruising already spread in a ring around Elmer's throat. He finally focused again and asked what happened. A miracle. Gus said, nothing you need to worry about or remember for now. Everyone dropped their weapons. Everyone dropped their weapons and bowed. It wasn't exactly Christian to let them keep doing that, but it beat having them try to kill them, Gus figured. Then, have you read any of those Spider Westerns from Death's Head? Yes, I've read about all of them. Um, I loved Magpie Coffin. Uh, Christopher Triana always does good stuff. I really liked Christine Morgan's the day Silver River Run Red. I may have these titles wrong. Um, Kinsey Jennings, I think her name is. She did one. She's a relatively new author. Magpie Coffin. It's the first one, but it is really good. It is really, really good. Um, my brain is scrambled. I can't remember things as well as I used to, but I loved all those books. I can't keep the title straight, but I read the first three. Yeah, the covers are amazing. They kind of have a collage of everything that's going on in the book, but they capture that old pulpy Western kind of thing going on, but then it has the horror element in it too. And every one of them's different, so not all of them. Well, they all splatter. I mean, obviously that's in the title, but one of them kind of leaned toward cosmic horror. Christine Morgan's just crazy. All her stuff was just wild. I was trying to remember if there's one more that I thought really stood out, but I'm a big fan of all of them. I have not read all of them, I'm sure, but I tore through a bunch of them. So I even wrote an article about it for Lit Reactor because they were just so good. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. I'm looking forward to seeing more of those. But if you like westerns and you like horror splatter, Death Head's Press splatter westerns are the best, and they're not very long. Well, Christopher Triana's is long. Everything he writes is long, but that one was good too. But most of them are pretty short. They're full novel length, but they aren't terribly long. Not all of them. All right, then the real show began. No. Let's. I have to get this lady off the ground first. The first lady healed in this strange little town of Second Thin. Let's say Second Skin. Town of Second Skin has the sign at the end of the road declared finally stood. Alright. She bent her fingers and then her knees, which were silent. I'm healed, she cried. Everyone rushed forward. But not to attack. Gus felt pressed and he got pulled in uncomfortable ways. But when he lit up his hands, they gave him a little space. Not a lot, but a little. Alright. Now we're in the home stretch here. Then the real show began. He healed bad eyes, bad teeth, weeping boils, ruined feet, babies struggling to breathe, and old cusses with rattling. He laid hands on the thin skin, over swelling tumors. They did not vanish immediately, but the suffering believed they felt a difference right away. Come to the church, Gus ordered. Come to the church and hear the message. They followed him up the hill toward the sanctuary. Like many new believers in centuries past. Okay. Alright, I'm not sure this ending is as solid as it could be, but I'm going to wrap it up here anyway, and we'll see what we can do in the editing. Alright. Gus spread his hands as he entered the dark building. Alright. That needs to be a new paragraph. Hold on a second. We're almost done here. Alright. Gus spread his hands as he entered the dark building. His fingers pulled through spider webs. But the creatures who made them shied away from his touch. Alright. Pews were overturned, but his followers set them right and took their seats. With the broken pews, many sat on the floor. They sat on the dusty floor and lined the dark walls all around. There was no cross in here, but that was fine. It smelled like something had died recently. That was not so fine. Gus had a job to do. He turned to face them all. Dorothy sat on the steps of the altar near him. Elmer stayed near the doors in the back, still rubbing his neck and looking around. What time are you getting off here, Jay? I am probably going to be on another 40 to 50 minutes, I'm guessing, because once I finish this up, I'm going to do an edit block, and then I'm going to read a story. None of them are particularly long, but that's my closest guess. I'm thinking. Elmer stayed near the doors in the back, still rubbing his neck and looking around in fear. He was a weasel of a man, but he served his purpose when a big gesture was needed. Gus waved the cobwebby fingers on both hands as he said, "From now on, this is a holy place, covered in the blood of your God. The blood he bled for you all. From now on, second skin will be known as Salvation City." Whether they understood or not, the townspeople gave up a cheer anyway. The sermon was only getting started.